welcome everyone to the fourth in our kind of 5-part series, helping people around getting onto the property ladder. And today we're going to be covering finding the one. So finding the property that the home that you kind of fall in love with and kind of want to buy. We have, as usual, the same speakers as we have in the last 4 weeks. So we're really happy and delighted to be joined by Joe, the home buyer coach, who has spent 14 years now in the financial services industry. He spent time as a mortgage broker. He really knows a huge amount around mortgages, home buying, and is really going to kind of cover a lot of important topics today. We've got Peter, who's the head of advice at Multiply. He's had 26 years experience in the industry. He bought his first property in 1994, so he's got a lot of experience with kind of buying and with investing and with financial advice in general. We've also got Dan, who's part of the advice team here at Multiply. He's had over 15 years experience in financial advice. And finally, myself, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Multiply, and I've been a financial advisor for nearly 3 years now. But prior to that, I spent over a decade in the kind of finance industry. So in terms of what we're going to be covering today, we're going to have the same kind of format as we have had in previous sessions. So we're going to be taking questions as we go along. For kind of the previous events that we've held, we have actually uploaded the videos onto our YouTube channel. So Dan has just posted that in the chat channel. So feel free to go and refer to any of those videos of the previous events. I'm going to kick off with a quick recap of the last session, and then the kind of 3 areas we're going to cover are going to be how to find the right home, that Joe's going to take us through, then viewing properties and how to make an offer. And there's lots and lots of like really useful bits and pieces in here around kind of what to look out for, what tools to use, what kind of questions to ask, real pro tips around going through the process that will help first-time buyers in particular, because you're all going to be doing this for the first time. There's a lot here that, when I went through the process, just about 10 years ago now, I would have found it insanely useful. So I think this can be one of our top events in terms of adding value to anyone going through their home buying journey. And I'm just going to kick off with a quick recap of the last session now. So before we go into how to find the right home, last week our kind of event was all around achieving mortgage success. We covered what a mortgage is and kind of different types of mortgages, and within that we also covered how to get help from family. That's a really common topic and a common area of questions that we get here at Multiply. We then went through what lenders like to see. Joe took us through the kind of importance of the credit score, but also different aspects that lenders look out for before they get comfortable with kind of lending you a mortgage, and the things that really help going through that process. And finally, we went through the whole process of getting a mortgage in principle. And within that, the really important parts were around affordability and stress testing, and just getting an overview of the whole process and kind of timelines for getting that mortgage in principle. So now, let's say you've got to the point where you've built up your deposit, you've kind of run through all like many of the things that we covered last week in terms of achieving mortgage success. You've taken care of your credit score. Now you're kind of at the point now where you can start looking for the right home. And on that topic, I'm going to pass it over to Joe, who's going to take us through this section.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Vivek. So yeah, there's lots of different ways that you can find the right house. And once you're in a position, so you've got the agreement in principle and you're ready to go, we'll look at a few of those options now. So Vivek, if you could swap over to the next slide. Thank you very much. So we'll start with the obvious ones and what most people tend to do, and that's looking online. So most estate agents are on search engines like Zoopla and Rightmove and the other ones you can see there too. So it's a great place to start. There are also tools built in to help narrow down your searches. You can draw little maps of the area that you want to live in, and you can also set up notifications so you're alerted as soon as they appear online. But the thing is, one of the best things you can do to get your offer accepted is to be the first one to make the offer. So the downsides of these search engines are it takes around 48 hours sometimes for properties to appear online. And by this time, the estate agent's already called out their registered buyers to book viewings or take offers, meaning you'll likely be too late anyway. Social media pages, that can be a good way of keeping track of new properties. Most estate agents these days are fairly good on social media. The only issue is with that, there's no way of filtering out properties that don't meet your criteria. So your feed may soon be filled up with completely irrelevant content. So yeah, but it's a good place to look. My favorite personally is registering directly with the estate agent. So if we look at the kind of on the high street, so in this type of market, speed is of the essence. So registering directly is probably the best way of finding out about new properties as quickly as possible. The way that it works is that you would ring up the estate agent, let them know that you're looking for a property. You'll be added onto that email list, and any properties that they take on that match with your criteria will then be emailed out to you. But just be prepared to be bombarded with lots and lots of emails. A little tip with that no other broker's probably ever going to let you know about, because it kind of feels counterintuitive from a broker's point of view. But estate agents will favor buyers that have seen their in-house mortgage broker. They're targeted to see as many people as possible, so they're likely to let these buyers know about new properties first, as they'll receive a commission usually from the mortgage. So it may be worth speaking to their broker to become one of their, let's call, hot buyers, ready to go, been financially qualified. Once you've found the property or you've had the offer accepted, you can then choose to go wherever you want for the mortgage. But the important thing is to be contacted first. So speaking to their broker, although it might not be who you want to use as the financial advisor, might get you into the property quicker. New builds often on search engines purely because they sell a lot at a time. So if you're looking to take advantage of any kind of government schemes or anything like that, you'll probably need to visit the developer's own websites or your own local Help to Buy website that'll have details of all properties on there too. If we could go on to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you very much. So how do you narrow down what property to go for? So family and friends, moving 200 miles away from family and friends may be perfect for some of us. For others, being more than like a few miles away would be unbearable. So if you're planning on starting a family, for example, babysitters nearby can be very, very useful. So, it really depends on your own circumstances. Commuting, this is a massive one, especially in larger cities like London, where house prices are ridiculous. With the rise of working from home, commuting distances are becoming less of an issue. However, if you do need to commute long distance to work, make sure you plan this first by tracking things like train and bus routes. And another thing, if you are moving far away from your place of work, this is quite a biggie. Lenders will check to see where you're buying in comparison with where you work. So they're likely to ask questions about how you're going to travel, and those travel costs can then affect how much you can potentially borrow, because it's seen as another outgoing. So if you are looking to relocate, factor in travel costs into the affordability. Schools. So the importance of schools in an area differs again for everyone. Some schools have certain catchment areas, so that might be something you need to think about if you're planning on starting a family or already have one. Crime, if you're moving within your local area, you'll probably have a good feel for how safe an area is. If you're moving to a new area, you may have no idea at all. So the website there is a good starting point to get an idea of kind of crime levels in the area that you think about moving to. But ultimately, a lot of this will come down to your budget. So the more of the boxes above you tick, the more expensive the property is likely to be, due to it being high demand. You're probably going to share those boxes with a lot of other people too. If we could move on, that would be great. So you've narrowed down the location. We now need to find the property itself. If you're buying a new build, it's fairly easy. You can go to the building site, you can have a look online. You can have a look at the show homes, most importantly. If the property that you want to purchase is not one of the show homes on that site, then find out if there's a show home at like another site that you can travel to have a proper viewing. If it's not possible, make sure that you're Googling to find out as much as you can about the developer, about the build, look at, reviews. A lot of people have got kind of negative impressions about new builds because of potentially build quality and things like that. So just get as much information as possible. Developers also might spend a lot more time and effort on building their show homes. So these will likely have a higher spec and are often furnished by interior designers to make them as appealing as possible. So just keep that in mind too. Next. So with older properties, when you're looking online, there are some useful bits of information available to help narrow down the property before committing to a viewing. Check through the photos, bit of an obvious one, but just be careful because some estate agents are very clever with their camera work. They like to use kind of wide angle lenses to make the rooms look as big as possible. And remember that estate agents take pictures in such a way to sell the property because they work on behalf of the seller, not the buyer. So they just need to make sure they can, sell it as easily as possible. I'll give you an example. There's one estate agent very, very close to me that uses filters on all of their photos, and all of their houses, when you go on their website, look exactly the same, whether or not they're completely battered or not. So the amount of buyers that they actually catfish is unreal. The sellers then complain about why they've got so many viewings and literally no offers. So it doesn't always work, but yeah, it's whatever they can do to get people through the door. So just be a little bit mindful of that. Floor plans. These are a godsend, especially if they have the measurements. It can really help visualize where your furniture is going to go and give you an idea on how the property flows. So yeah, floor plans are great. Street view, that's also very important. So find the property on a map, get a good idea on the location. It will help check things like parking and local amenities. Also, if you think a property is like a really good price, have a look at the street view. And if you find out it's right next door to a kebab shop or something like that, and personally, I wouldn't be put off, but it might put the lender off. So, just be a bit mindful. New or old, this is like a really hot topic. It's one of the main questions that people kind of bicker over. And again, it's completely down to personal choice. There's loads of pros and cons to both. A new build may have a warranty, but the rooms might be really small compared to an older property. A new build might lose its value quicker. When purchasing an older property, just be aware that all that charm and character might come at a price. Maintaining older properties generally costs more than a new one. They can be much lower in terms of kind of energy efficiency ratings. So yeah, the running costs might be a lot more than a new build. Okay, next slide. So everything we've covered is important, but it needs to be worked alongside the budget. The reality is that ticking all of the boxes on what you want from a location or property perspective may mean prices are simply out of reach. Narrowing down the right property and location is a tough decision, and there are many variables to consider, but ultimately it is your decision. So just make sure you work out on what's important to you that fits within your budget. In the next section, I'll be handing over to Peter to discuss viewing properties and how to make an offer. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe. I guess before I start with this bit, I'd just sort of say something that I've seen time and time again over the years. And that is sometimes how little time people spend viewing properties or viewing individual properties. And when you think about it logically, you're spending hundreds of thousands of pounds, and often people do this off the back of a 10-15 minute viewing. And most people would spend longer than that if they were at a car showroom buying a car. So just have that in mind as a concept of you're spending a lot of money here, and therefore it makes sense to spend time on it, have some structure behind it, how you view a property, and be consistent in that approach as well. So Vivek, maybe if you could just move the slide on. And I guess it sounds very obvious, but actually it's worth saying, and that is do a viewing or carry out a viewing with a checklist. That way it delivers you consistency, and it also delivers you some structure as well in what you're doing and what you're looking for as you go around a property. And you know, there are good checklists out there, and I won't be ashamed to say, why not use the Which one? The Which property viewing checklist is very good. It covers off all the basic things that you need to do, and you know, you got the back that you can write all your notes on as well. But another couple of key things here, which are, remember that you are probably talking to an estate agent, and the estate agent, as Joe said, is acting on behalf of the seller. They're not acting on behalf of the buyer. So just keep your poker face. So you want to be, even if you absolutely walk in, you love it and everything about it, just keep your poker face as you're going around and viewing it, because that may well help you as you get further on into the negotiation around the price. Okay. And the other thing is, don't be rushed. This is a key one, because estate agents often have got stacked up lots of appointments. And as Joe said, they're targeted to have appointments for viewings. So therefore, they really want to get you in and out and move on to their next one. You don't be rushed. Take it at your pace. That's the important thing with this. Okay. So maybe if we could move it on, Vivek. And that leads on to, you need to look at things from the outside condition as well as the inside, okay? Because sometimes you can be, if you're running late, for example, to the viewing, it may well be that you get there and you're straight inside and you haven't really had an opportunity to have a look at the outside. So you need to make sure you're looking at the inside and the outside, okay? Using your senses as you do it. So for example, are there any odd smells, for example, that are in the area? Is there a reason for it? That's not to say that, you know, there always might be a smell, but there might be something that might be worth investigating further. In particular, look out for things like cracks. Now, it doesn't mean that if there's a crack, oh, it means that there's subsidence and it's falling down. It doesn't mean that. But noting it down may again just help you with when you come to the price negotiations of the actual property itself. But some things you should also be looking out for are whether there are any signs of damp. Now, if you're going into a house that's already being lived in, then it's quite, if there is damp, you can bet your bottom dollar there are going to be things that have been put in front of that to either hide it, either because of the viewing itself, or also just because of, quite naturally, if you were living somewhere and there was a mark on a wall, you might want to hide, to disguise it, okay? But just be aware of these different things, and you need to do that in each and every room, be looking for these different things. Now, you'll have to ask permission for this, okay, but it might be very helpful for you if you're able to take some photos or videos, but be very careful about that. You know, you don't want to be going into maybe a child's bedroom and videoing in there, so you need to be a little bit sensitive to it. But the reason why I'm saying it is that everybody's memory fades quite quickly. Okay, so it makes sense that if you can have photos, you can refresh your memory about things, and also it allows you to possibly get somebody else's opinion on something. Okay, so these are core things you need to be thinking about. Okay, if you could just move the slide on. Checking out the neighborhood. Now, whether you are running late or not, we would always recommend that you spend some time after the viewing or just before, just checking out the neighborhood. Like Joe said in the section before, it makes sense just to get a feel for the place. Does it feel right for you? And that's the other important thing, is for one person, it feels right. For another person, it might not feel right. That's the reason why you do it, because it's about what feels right for you. We'd also suggest maybe taking a friend or family member with you. And one of the benefits of doing that is that they can keep your feet on the ground sometimes, because when you find one that you really like, sometimes you miss bits. You miss the bit of damp that might be in one of the corners, or you might miss the crack that's running down the edge of one of the buildings. And you know, it might not change whether you choose to buy it or not, but you should be aware of these things. Okay. You also need to be asking questions. Okay, so and these are some of the common questions that we would recommend that you ask. And again, things like knowing how long it's been on the market could help you again in terms of what offer you might put in. Understanding why it's being sold. You might not always get the right answer, should we say, or a truthful answer for it. But if somebody is selling, for example, because of a relationship breakdown, it's possible you might be able to get the property slightly cheaper. Okay. Also, it's worth understanding what's being left. I know of houses that have been bought where everything's been taken. The shed in the back garden that you would have thought might have been left has been taken, and the expectation has suddenly changed. Okay. Also worth understanding from the estate agent how big the chain is, and that's important because being a first-time buyer, you unlock that chain. Okay, and we'll come back to that in a minute. The other thing is, don't be afraid to go for a second viewing. Okay, nothing wrong. If you're really keen and you go for a second viewing, do it on a different day, different time. Because if you've had your first viewing and it's been, let's say, for example, Saturday afternoon at not 3 o'clock, let's say 4 o'clock or whatever, and it's been quite quiet, then that will give you could give you a false impression of what it's like on a Monday morning at 9 o'clock when you might be leaving to go to work. It could be mayhem in the area. So if you're getting a second viewing, maybe worthwhile just choosing a different time, something like that. So Vivek, if you could move on the slide there. So ultimately, we can't tell you what is going to be right for you and what is not right for you. That's the decision you have to make. But hopefully these are things that you can be thinking about. But once you've found a property that you've thought, actually, I would like to make an offer on this, that's when we move into the next stage. But just before I do that, I just wanted to ask Joe if he had anything else that he felt he wanted to add on the viewing aspect.
I think just get as much knowledge as possible. On the viewing is where you build the knowledge you need to make the offer if it comes to that. So yeah, just get as much knowledge as possible. As Peter said, find out why the property is being sold, find out, what are the kind of viewings, what are the kind of interests, what are the kind of offers that people have had. As soon as you build up the knowledge, realistically what kind of offer you can make.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. Which actually sort of kind of leads on to, there's some stuff you probably just need to do before you make the offer. Okay, and it really leads into a bit of last minute research that we would suggest you consider. And Vivek, if you could just move on the slide deck. And this one, you may well have done some of this beforehand. Okay, in fact, we would suggest that you do try and get a feel beforehand, but do just have a look to see what values of similar houses have been on the same street, because you'll have a feel for the place now. You might have a better feel for, okay, this property is sold for notably more than this one, but actually having been there, I understand that because it's bigger, it's got different aspects or whatever. But what it might also identify for you is similar houses that have all sold for a similar amount. That might be a better pitch for where you should be maybe making your offer. And the seller is quite likely to have a view themselves as that, and then maybe put in a price that, well, a lot of sellers will put on a price that is higher than they actually realistically expect to get, but in the expectation that there's going to be a bit of haggling, shall we say, from that. And so do that bit of research first. When you come to make an offer, don't be afraid in your head to be thinking of going in low. You might just be surprised because of all those factors. For example, why somebody might be selling, the urgency, they might have been on the property for a long time, on the market for a long time, and they're now maybe desperate to be selling. These low offers, you do sometimes get a surprise with that. Okay, Vivek, if you could turn it on again.
For that, I think we've got a question that
Okay.
probably worth answering live. So, it's an anonymous question. Do you think there is a price ceiling for prices in London, or will they continue to rise exponentially?
Right. Okay. Well, I'll give my view first, and then maybe Joe will have a view. My view comes back down to the basics of economics and the laws of supply and demand, and ultimately the price that somebody will get has to link into the affordability and willingness of the buyers to be able to accept those prices. So ultimately, it's going to come down to people's affordability. So my personal views are: is it? Sorry, the question was. Sorry, let me just see the question, the specific question again. Do I think that there's a ceiling? No, I don't think there is a ceiling as such, because if somebody's prepared to pay a certain price and they have the resources to do it, then the price can keep on going up. Realistically, though, will they continue to rise exponentially? I don't think that either. I think that markets have always traditionally gone through ups and downs, and London is no different. You know, it goes through periods when prices have fallen for periods of time as well. Joe, any thoughts or contrary? You may think to the contrary.
I think you, I think you've nailed it, really. It's a very desirable place to live. It's a big place, obviously. And supply and demand, there's always a huge amount of demand in London. So that does govern a high price. Now, there's a common misconception that, a house is worth what someone's willing to pay for it, but that's not strictly true, especially if you're getting a mortgage. A house in London, say you get an offer accepted and it's a ridiculously high price. If you're getting a mortgage on it and the lender goes out and values the property, they might not agree with that price. So it really does depend on the market. Do I think there's a price ceiling like Peter? No, I don't. Will they continue to rise? It will depend on the demand. If the demand continues to rise, then so will the prices.
Yeah. Okay. And that very question that you're asking is kind of the type of question the Bank of England is grappling with all of the time, when they're considering mortgage interest rates. It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one. I've said this before in other sessions, that sometimes you've got to remember you are buying a home, which may be a long-term investment for you, but primarily it's a home that you're buying, and it's what it's worth to you, subject to obviously the affordability we just said. All right. Okay, Vivek, if you could move the slide on.
Yeah, I think we've got a couple of other questions worth answering, but I think we can do it after we've finished a couple more slides, because I think they'll be probably a bit more relevant then.
Yeah, I think a lot of them are based around kind of offering. So if we get the offering slides done, that might actually answer quite a few of the questions anyway.
Cool.
Okay. So yes, if you're first time buyer status, you actually are you're in a position of power in some sense. And that is the sense that you are unlocking a chain. You don't come with a chain. Okay. You actually break the chain in many ways, and that can be worth something. Okay, it means that you can complete. Generally, it means you can complete quickly. It means if you've done what we've suggested before and have got a mortgage in principle, that in itself can speed up the process from the lender's perspective. But we do think it's worth haggling with this and having a bit of a this is very much multiplying my own viewpoint on this, is that it is worth going in at a price lower than what somebody has got it up for. Be mindful of things like how long it's been on the market for, because it may well be that you could have somebody else that straight away comes above you. So you need to be a little bit mindful of that. But if you've done your homework and you've maybe identified some flaws with the property, then don't be afraid to make an offer that has actually knocked off a bit from the asking price. Mm-hmm. Vivek?
Yeah, so I've got a cheeky question there for Joe actually around like getting a mortgage in principle. Peter, you mentioned that can speed things up. Joe, what's your experience been in terms of how much it tends to speed things up versus your customers or clients who don't have a mortgage in principle in place?
Okay, so I think again, it depends where you're looking to buy. It depends on demand, but houses around here, a lot of people aren't even letting people view properties unless they've got an agreement in principle. So, you know, sometimes it's not even down to how much it can speed the process up. It's whether or not you can actually view the property in the first place. So at the minute, it's vital. It's vital to, because even if they do let you view, for example, and you're in a position where you put an offer in and you're up against 10 other people that have got their agreement and principles in place, or they've sold their property, or they've got the cash in the bank ready to go, you're not going to be considered, you know. And at times like that, it's not even the amount that you offer, it's your position. So yeah, having a mortgage in principle should be the first thing you do.
Awesome, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks.
Vivek, possibly if we could move on to the next. Thank you. I guess it's worth just having just a couple of minutes around who you're making the offer to. And broadly, it's going to be one of three people. You're either going to be talking to an estate agent, typically if it's an existing property that's been put up through estate agency, or it's possible you might be talking to the seller themselves, much more likely if that's buying privately, or it might be the salesperson, particularly if that's a new build or something like this. With all three of these, you have the potential to talk to them about a lower price and negotiating on a number of things. And it's actually quite true when you look at new builds. People often think that they come with a fixed price, and well, that's not necessarily the case. In certain scenarios they might, but there might be opportunities to negotiate or discuss certain aspects. But the key bit is that you've got those three different parties who you may be making the offer to. Probably the one that's maybe the hardest to do, and this is it all comes down to personality, is talking to the seller themselves. Because if you want to be pointing out things like, well, you've got cracks all over there, or that's not been looked after very well, that could be seen very personal. But you shouldn't let that get in the way of you getting the right deal for you. Okay, so Vivek, if you could just move it on to the next slide, which is very much about making the offer itself. And with both of these scenarios, we think you should be emphasizing that you're a first-time buyer and that you like the property. So if we look at the estate agents and sellers first, you want to highlight to them that you've done your research and that you point out the flaws. So you're aware of what you're doing and you're not going to be hoodwinked, shall we say, in any way. Then I think it's a matter of very much stating your offer, leaving your contact details, requesting that they come back to you as soon as possible, and then moving away and letting them come back to you. But I just wanted, this last point that is on under the estate agents and sellers is quite a key one. Don't be afraid to walk away. Okay, if you don't feel as if you're getting the deal that's right for you, there will be other properties that will come along. It might not be that first one that you ideally wanted, but you've got to be feeling right from all of the different aspects, whether it be the property itself, the location, and the price as well that you're paying for it. Okay. With the salespeople for a new build or something like that, you can request extras. It might be that your negotiation might not be so much to do with the price, but it might be to do with throwing in things like free legal fees, or even as much as what stamp duty costs, for example, when they come in. But it could be that they could throw in some free fixtures and fittings. You know, a lot of this will come down to with new builds as to how well they're selling at that particular time. It might be that there are some of the properties that they are, let's say, aren't selling as quickly as others. So these are just different areas to be aware of. I think my message is, don't assume because it's a new build, it's a fixed price and there's nothing to discuss when it comes to the price. It could be the price itself. It could also include some of the extras, either the costs or additional things like fixtures and fittings. Have you got anything that you wanted to add on that, Joe?
Yeah. So making an offer at the minute, we have to realize that we're in a very kind of interesting market. And I think that the tips on offering that we would be giving 18 months ago compared to today, or even 6 months ago compared to today, would be vastly different. So I just want to reiterate that this isn't for all markets. Specifically now, even looking at some of the questions coming in at the minute about, people offering 15, 20,000 pounds over asking price. The key really is just to, like, the basics are, get as much knowledge in you as possible about the property and about the seller's situation and about potential other viewers and potential other offers. Make sure you're in that property first. So register with the local estate agents, get in the property first, make sure that you're the first person to make the offer. The sellers will always have the first offer in their mind. They'll always think back to that. So if you can be that first person, that will really, really help. What else? It's a strange time at the minute. We're at a bit of a weird time where, even though the estate agents valued it as something, some offers, and this isn't everywhere, by the way, some offers are going 15, 20, 25,000 pounds over the asking price. So what will happen? Is that eventually gonna level off, or are house values going to increase up to these 25, 30,000 pounds over asking price? We'll have to wait and see. Personally, I think it will start to level off a little bit once things like the stamp duty holiday end. But yeah, no, I think Peter's covered pretty much everything that you'd need to go through as as the basics. But it's just a strange market, and we'll come onto this a little bit more in the Q&A when we can go into a bit more detail with it. But yeah, no, I think, Peter, you've pretty much nailed that there.
Okay.
So just before we go into the live questions, I just had a question around, just linking back to some of the stuff that we covered off last week and the week before. Obviously, like, a really critical part of the process is when the lender's kind of surveyor or conveyancer kind of goes in and kind of values the property. Are you seeing like an increase in the number of cases where there's a bit of a deviation there between offer prices and where these valuations are coming in? And are there any kind of consistent areas or causes for why there could be differences in those viewpoints?
Yeah. So think about when you're bidding on something on eBay, you've seen something that you like and it's up to 40 quid. And in your mind, you've got a limit. You say, I'm not going to go any more than 50 quid. And before you know it, you're up to 60, 65 because the excitement takes over. Now, this is probably doubled when it comes to things as exciting as a £250,000 house or whatever, where, it's your money and the mortgage lender's money too. So the difficulty is when you start going above the value set by the estate agent, or just the general value of what the house potentially should be. When you get a mortgage lender involved, the surveyor goes out to the property to make sure that they think it's worth what you're agreeing to pay for the property. And there's always a bit of a delay. Well, it seems like there's a bit of a delay between what people are buying the properties for and what the valuers still think the properties are worth. So what I have found is, although some properties are going 15, 20,000 pounds over the asking price, when the surveyor goes out and has a look at the property, they down value it to somewhere, at the minute, it seems to be somewhere in between what the estate agent's got it on for and what the offer's been accepted at. Somewhere in between. Sometimes it'll go up to the offer amount. Sometimes it's down at what the property was valued at. But what it really normally comes down to is what kind of sale prices have happened in the area. They look at comparable evidence. They look at other houses that have sold nearby. and take into account that house values have crept up anyway, and kind of make a judgment call. So when there's a bidding war and things are going, thousands of pounds over the asking price, that's soon brought down to, a sensible price, with what I've seen from my mortgage applications anyway.
Cool.
Okay. Vivek, I was going to hand back to you just to sort of close off the session and lead us into the Q&A anyway. So
sure thing.
Cool.
So what is it that we've covered in this session today? We've covered how to find the right home. We went through like the tools to use, different approaches to make, beyond just using a Rightmove or a Zoopla or one of these kind of search engines. What's really important there is registering with local estate agents. That will allow you to kind of get in there quickly. We covered viewing properties, and being like really focused and structured about your approach when it comes to viewings, having a checklist, being really organized about it, and the broad areas to kind of focus on and pay attention to. And finally, how to make an offer. Key questions to ask, what the really important areas of information are that you need to be armed with in order to go and make an offer with confidence, and to make sure that you're making an offer with all the relevant information at hand. And just before we go into Q&A, just to tee up a kind of final session out of this series, we'll be sealing the deal. So today we're kind of covering everything up to the point where you make the offer. The next stage will obviously be an offer getting accepted. And next week we'll be covering what to expect once that offer is expected, and kind of all of our hints and tips around that. But until then, I think we've got a decent amount of time to cover off questions. So let's kick off with that.
Okay.
Right, should we pick up? So Lauren asked a question. Is it still the case that agents are listing high prices? As I've heard, they are lowballing at the moment to generate interest. Any views on that?
Me personally, I think that viewing numbers are so high at the minute that I haven't seen any people lowballing to generate interest in terms of. So still the case that agents are listing high prices. Yes, they are. Yeah. High prices, which even then offers seem to be going, above and beyond that at some stage. I haven't seen any evidence of lowballing at the minute to generate interest, because the interest hasn't needed to be generated at the moment, I wouldn't say. Any thoughts, Peter?
I was going to agree. The only bit that I possibly could foresee, and I haven't experienced this to be able to say it, is that it could potentially change from area to area. Yeah. I know a good friend of mine, estate agent down here in Kent, his market basically doesn't cover first-time buyers. Okay, the whole area that he works in is really not first-time buyer territory, and he's not seen any change at all in what's happening recently. It may be the different areas where maybe the first-time buyers market is changing a bit, but I would bow to your knowledge on that, Joe, other than to say that I feel that it would probably change from location to location. Yeah,
agreed.
And you just got to watch the area that you're in, and this is the important part. Okay.
Cool.
Okay, we've got this one's for you, Joe. What is your advice for houses that are going straight to best and final offers in very competitive areas? Not much time to consider decisions, etc. in Bristol at the moment.
Okay. So yeah, it goes back to my point of this is where things kind of get a little bit silly with prices. So you can't stop other high offers coming in. There's nothing you can do. They're going to come. So you can do all the preparation you want, you can do all the research you want, but it's not going to stop people from making offers. So kind of a little bit, if you can't beat them, join them. But the key thing here is just be a little bit mindful about, could house values drop a little bit after this massive surge? is it still affordable for you if you do go higher than the asking price? You know, can you still afford the monthly payments? Deposit sizes, is it going to affect your standard of living by stretching to it? What you could do is, you know, do what you can to get the offer accepted by going above and beyond what's, you know, what others are offering. And then arrange a survey. You know, your mortgage lender will provide a basic valuation. You can arrange a home buyer's report. Now, if they come back at a lower value, then right away you can go back and try to renegotiate. It's a bit of a pain ditching you once you've had the offer agreed and then going with somebody else. So there'll probably be areas for negotiation at that stage if you do try to negotiate after you've secured the property. If you've got a more thorough survey, this will highlight any areas that might need updating, might need renovation, might need changing. So use that for reasons as to why you're dropping your initial offer. So once you've secured the property, you can then renegotiate if you've got grounds to, and if you're, you know, ballsy enough to do it. So yeah.
I think the other bit I would just add, and this is a general, not specifically an answer to this particular question, is that when you're in that sort of making an offer stage, don't let that stop you maybe continuing to look at properties, and because it may just be that you can't agree a price on that, and you've maybe lost time in the viewing process. So sort of it's like having your backup plan, shall we say, but probably not quite the same. But that's what I would be saying to people is when you're looking at making those offers, don't sort of stop what you were doing, see if that offer works out or not, and then if it doesn't, start again. Just keep on that process of looking at properties, and because you never know, you might just come across an even better one as you do that, in which case you might sort of decide, actually, no, I want to look at this, I want to make an offer on this one. Okay.
Just to touch on that as well, Peter, it might be worth telling the estate agents and sellers that you're doing exactly that too. It's very, in this market, it's very easy for them to think that they're the ones in the position of power. But if you used to let them know that you've also got other viewings, you know, you've got other things on the table too, it might make them want to, you know, really secure you then.
Yeah. Okay. Does having a conveyancer in place ready to instruct and having a mortgage ready make you more attractive as a buyer? Now, I know I think we've already answered the having the mortgage in principle type thing in place. I think we've covered that. I have my own thoughts on the conveyancer part. What are your thoughts about whether there's a conveyancer in place? Does that make yourself more attractive?
Personally, I'd say no, purely because you can't get declined by the conveyancer. You know, if you want to pay the conveyancer the money to do the conveyancing for you, you know, that can be arranged within an hour or two. So there's no real benefit to the seller of having a conveyancer in place already, because it's so easy just to get in place.
Yeah, and I was going to echo exactly that. There's not much that a conveyancer can do to get you further along the line, possibly carry out verification of identity checks on you as an individual. Aside from that, I can't see that there's that much that's something that could help. Okay. What is the benefit of having a broker make the offer for you? Right. Okay. Well, I guess we need to. Lauren, are you able to define what you mean by broker? Do you just mean somebody who you've appointed to act as a intermediary between you and the seller, or do you actually mean the mortgage broker? Because I think there might be there will be different answers between the two of them. Maybe we'll just wait to see if Lauren can add that comment. But sorry, I meant the mortgage broker. I assumed it was part of the process, right? Joe, you're a mortgage broker. I'll let you.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's not something that we really have the ability to do. We can't make an offer on your behalf. It's something that you will need to speak directly with the estate agent or seller or developer to negotiate. We can provide all the tools, and you know, you can discuss what your thoughts are prior to making the offer, but it does need to be you that does it.
Yeah, the broking aspect of being a mortgage broker is the intermediary between you and the mortgage lender. That's that aspect to it.
I mean, brokers are more than happy to kind of echo your position. So there's been many times where estate agents have asked me to confirm, buyers' positions and things like that, so I can, sing your praises massively on the phone and, let them know that you're the best thing since sliced bread and all of that. But making the, financial offer through the estate agent does need to be done through the buyer.
Okay. Another one from Lauren here. If you know your budget, lower and upper limit, should you be viewing houses at the lower end of the spectrum, or is it okay to view houses at the top end? Maybe I'll give my thoughts on this one. First of all, you could do either, but you have to just think about what your expectations are. If you are going to be looking at properties at the upper limits, you have to understand that it might well be that your budgetary constraints prevent you being able to actually maybe get the price that the seller is ultimately going to agree. Whereas if you start at the lower end, your room for scope and flexibility is more. Okay, so you could do either. You just have to set your expectations different. That's my thoughts on it. And Joe?
Yeah, I agree. But we talk about these properties, being offered over the asking price, but that's not every property. There's lots of properties for sale near me that have been on the market for months and months and months. They're not selling, for one reason or another. So like we went through earlier with Peter, make sure that you've done your research about how long the property's been on the market, what the seller situation is, because properties that have been on for a little bit longer might be, much more likely to accept a lower offer. So if that's one of your properties that are in the higher range of your budget, then, it's still worthwhile pursuing. I wouldn't just focus on lower end properties. I personally in this market, I try to see as many things as possible. But that's my thoughts.
Okay. Next one says, if you're in a chain, at what point are you able to make an offer? Is it worth viewing ahead of this? Now, Rebecca, I'm assuming by this that you are not a first-time buyer and you have a property that you are selling. Is that what you mean by if you're in a chain? Or you mean you're a first-time buyer and you know that the people that you're buying from are therefore going to be in a chain? Maybe if you could just clarify that will help. But if we assume the latter, Joe, that it is a first-time buyer, that Rebecca is a first-time buyer, what are your thoughts on able to make an offer? At what point are you able
I
to
don't think that reading that, I think it means that they've got something to sell, because if the seller's in a chain, that wouldn't really make any difference as to when the offer can be made, I wouldn't think.
Yes, you're right.
So if we assume that Rebecca's got a property to sell, then a lot of estate agents aren't letting people view houses until the house is at least on the market. What normally happens in this circumstance is you're free to make an offer whenever you want. But what will likely happen is that offer will be subject to being accepted once you've sold your property at least. Once you've sold, the likelihood is that it can all be accepted and, sold subject to contract. But until you're in a position where the kind of chain's complete on your end, it's unlikely they're going to be in a position to accept it. They can, accept it subject to sale of yours, but they'll likely keep it advertised until it's all tied up your end.
Okay. Vinesh asks, if you've found a house you like, but another offer has already been accepted, can you make a counter offer, and is the estate agent obliged to relay this to the seller? I don't know if you've heard of the phrase gazumping. If you have, that what you've just said here is exactly that. And gazumping is perfectly legal. Some people might argue that morally, is it the right thing to do? Because you could basically be taking over someone else's dream that they thought they were already there. But essentially, it's perfectly legal. The estate agent, I believe, is obliged to relay this to the seller because you have made this offer. It is the reason why we recommend that if you agree a price for a property, you ask the seller if they would be prepared to take the mortgage, take the property off the market. Okay, but that scenario you've just painted is gazumping. It's perfectly legal, but some might argue it's not very nice. Joe?
Yeah, pretty much exactly that. So if you want to, you can, and the estate agent will need to put that forward to the seller. But it would have to be something special to, make an estate agent or, seller change their mind. But yeah, you can do it, and they do have a right to put it forward.
Okay. So Lily asks, hello, we are from South Wales, and from our experience over the last 4 months, all offers are needed to be at least 15 to 20k over asking price to stand any chance of getting the house. Any thoughts? Well, my first thought on this, and I know we've spoken about this, so I'll let you answer it in full, Joe. My first thought when I think about these things are, who is it that is telling us that you need to be putting in 15 to 20k over? Is it the estate agent? That raises some questions. Is it you just know that? That's fine. But Joe, do you want to answer it again?
Yeah, so that's a good point, actually. We hear about all these stories about offers going stupidly over the asking price, but the only person with that actual information is probably going to be the estate agent. But I suppose when it does get to that stage, it's because there's so many people offering, and it wouldn't be, it wouldn't make sense to not be honest about that. So let's say that, honestly, this is what's going on. All these offers are miles above the asking price. If you think the property's worth that and it's affordable, and you think it's going to be a lovely home to live in, then go for it. But don't start 15 grand over the asking price. Don't make your first offer 15,000-20,000 pounds over. Start at the asking price, try to negotiate, and then get the feedback from the estate agent. You don't have to stick with your first offer. You can make as many offers as you want. You can build your way up. You can get some feedback, and then work it out from there. But like I said, if you think the property's worth that, if it's within your budget, then there's no harm in you doing that too.
I think broadly answers the comment. Vivek, as CEO of Multiply, and Joe and I have done a lot of talking, would you like to answer the question which says, please can you explain what Multiply is/does?
Sure. So hey, Lauren. So we're fundamentally a financial advice company. So what we do is we provide recommendations in the form of plans to help our customers achieve their goals. Currently, we're very focused on helping our customers who've got first-time home buyers, but also we're helping putting investment plans together, as well as different areas. And in terms of what we do for first-time home buyers, we currently offer through our app the market-leading kind of lifetime ISA, which is like a foundational product for first-time home buyers. We can get a government bonus, but also like the whole plan from start to finish in terms of helping to set an achievable goal, as well as linking at the right moments in time our customers through to mortgage brokers, and so that they can get indicative quotes, mortgages and principals, and everything else they need to kind of buy their first home.
Okay.
So download the app today and get going.
We've just had, if you find a house with an onward chain, i.e. the current homeowners still need to find another home to live into, can you put a condition on your offer with a time frame for the current homeowners to move, i.e. this offer is subject to the house being available within the next 2 months to move into? I'm going to let Joe answer it. The only comment I have on the question is more about understanding how long the time takes from agreeing the price through to completion. 2 months would be a rather harsh timescale, would be my comment on it. But Joe, do you want to answer the fundamental question, which is about can you, and your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. So You're entitled to make as many offers as you want to. You're also entitled to pull out of any sales that you're currently involved in. So it will be what there's no issues with doing exactly that. You know, you can say, look, I really like the house. I want to make an offer. The offer gets accepted, but you can just say to the estate agent that you can't wait forever. So put a time limit on 2 months, as you say, so 2 months for them to sell their property and get the chain complete. That's fair enough. Yeah, there's no issues with that.
Awesome. So I think, Peter, I think you responding to the last question from Lauren?
Yeah, the last question, the answer was, I've answered it, but basically I've said, yes, that's us. You know, that is us.
Yes. That's the reason
exactly.
why we set up the company.
Exactly. And one of the core reasons why Vivek and I met up was around, I've been in this industry for many, many years and had seen for over a decade now that financial advice was moving digital. It was just at what pace. And financial advice, typically in the old world that I came from, shall we say, has always moved rather slowly. Technology is suddenly making advisors wake up and think, oh, I've got to embrace this. I've got to understand how technology and the internet in particular is making, first of all, advice much more affordable. There's typically been an advice gap between those that take advice and those that can afford advice. Technology has the opportunity to totally sort of take that advice gap away. Not to say that it replaces it. I don't believe that it will ever fully replace the traditional face-to-face financial advisor relationship, but it certainly can replace a lot of this advice gap. Typically, the likes of yourselves who are coming into probably in your 20s and 30s, I'd imagine, looking to build your wealth and purchase your properties. This is exactly what I'm in this for, because I fundamentally believe that there is a space for digital solutions to deliver advice cost effectively and good advice. That's my pitch anyway, so I apologize for being like that, but I do. It's one of the bits that has driven me a lot for a good number of years now. Okay.
Cool. Well said, Peter. I think we've finished bang on time. And that's great. I think we've got better and better around our timings as each session has gone on. So well done. And really look forward to seeing as many of you as possible at our next session, which would be the same time next week. So with that, goodbye, everyone. Enjoy the football tonight, and see as many of you next week as possible. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.